Alright, we're going to talk about this little VMSC carburetor here. This is a VM26SC carburetor. The one you have might be a smaller model. I don't know which one you're using, but they're all based on the basic same premise, style setup. So we're going to kind of go over the ports right quick and explain a few things to you, and then how to clean this critter. You can see here I've already removed the float and the needle valve for the fuel here, the main jet and its washer. Okay, so there's a washer in there, don't forget to take that out, and the pilot jet that was in this circuit. Okay, we've unscrewed that. That's what this is. This is a VM22/210 jet. That's what size jet this is. This one is an N100.604 jet, I believe. It's what they call the large round. Both these jets are available in various sizes. They are available today. You can buy them. So, and then you got of course the slide. The slide's marked on the bottom side here. It tells you what it is. I think this one's marked over here. Actually, I think this is a 2.0 slide. This one is. And then then of course this brass part in here, this is a certain size brass part as well. There's a whole range that you can use here, but typically you're going to stick with the stock components here. Don't change anything from here. Start from this position, and then you can kind of build your carburetor to suit. So typically the stock settings, as long as you run the stock air box, you ain't made no real changes. The stock jetting will be just fine. You may have to change it if say you change the air cleaner to a uni style or a pod style filter. Sometimes you may have to raise the main jet up a little bit, or raise this needle. It has a few different slots in it. I mean, typically the one that comes in this carburetor is usually set in the middle. I've seen some set on slot 2, but you'll have to look and see what your setting is for this one. And then you can also move this, with the carburetor mounted. Just take the top off, pull this out, and then just move this clip. If there's some kind of mid-range fainting or something like that, it feels like it's not running quite right or something like that, you can raise this up a notch and it'll kind of clean that up. So what we want to do is we want to clean this critter up. We're going to talk about a few holes that are in it. On the back side, I'm going to start here. Well, let's look at the carburetor as it's inverted, as it will sit on the bike, so we can go over this stuff. This hole here runs the choke circuit, which runs up into here where the choke plunger is. Generally there's some kind of plunger. It's either on a cable or a lever. You push the lever down, it chokes, and then you raise the lever, it goes up. This actually gets its gas from this brass tube on the bottom of the carburetor. On the VMSC, there's also a small jet that's installed here in this tube. The later model carburetors don't have that jet, but the earlier models do. That jet is sized specifically for the motor it happens to be running. So you can make sure that you can run it if that thing falls out, but what'll happen is if you try to choke it and that thing's missing, then what it'll do is it'll want to flood up pretty quick while you're choking it, and then you'll have to turn it off and kind of rev the engine kind of a little bit to kind of keep it running, because every time you turn the choke on, it wants to flood because this thing's missing. So it's just pulling straight fuel out of the bowl and throwing it at the engine. This one down here at the bottom and this one right here are for the air jet, for the idle air mixture. Usually one is in operation. You can tell which one is in operation by which side of the carburetor the screw is on. This side is a blank, so this hole here doesn't go anywhere. It just kind of stops there and doesn't go any further than that. That's about as far as it goes right there. This one will travel on up the bowl internally and then cut over and then feed air to the pilot circuit that's in this hole right here. And when the engine's pulling it idle, what it'll do is it'll pull some air through that hole based on where the screw, on how much air you permitted it with the screw to actually accept, and then that will of course either richen or lean the idle out depending on which size jet you have in here. This bottom one here is for the needle jet that's down here in the bottom. This one is the needle jet is this one with the skirt on it. You want to make sure you're using one of these that don't have any damage done to the skirt, no missing chips, things of that nature, because all that affects how it runs, in the mid-range. So you know, make sure this is in one piece, it's not broke. These are specifically sized for these carburetors, so whichever one that came in your unit as stock, that's the one you should use along with this needle. They've been paired together to kind of work correctly for the machine that you have. Changing any one of these items could lead to a lean or rich mixture, depending on which taper this is or how big that hole is. Just as an average, you know, just as basic information, this thing, it has a different size hole. I don't know if you can see it in there or not all the way through, but there's a hole that goes all the way through. That hole is sized based on the size that you purchased for this thing, and then this needle adjusts the flow. So think about it like this is providing the total fuel that the bike can consume. This needle is regulating the fuel in the half, you know, up to about half toward 3/4 throttle. It regulates the fuel so it doesn't over flood, and then once you get above that, then the main takes over, and then it's just dumping straight fuel to the motor. So we got the back end of this covered. So we got the air jet, we got for the pilot, we got the air jet for the needle jet, and then we got this blank over here. There's a couple dummies in here. They don't really do nothing. There's nothing there for you. It's these two right here that you need to touch on, and this choke jet. Now there's also on the bottom, we'll look at the bottom right quick. So you got the main jet, pilot jet is in here, and this tube right here is actually for the choke orifice. It fits down into this relief in the bowl you can see right here. This relief in the bowl is fed by this small hole down here in the bottom of the bowl. And if this is plugged up, then you'll have problems with choke. It won't want to start cold. It'll be, you know, once it's running hot, it'll run fine, but every time you try to start it cold, it won't want to idle. It won't want to, you know, choke or anything. So, you know, you have to go through all that. So then we're going to look at the front here. The front, we're going to tip this over so you're looking at it so you can see down here in the bottom. The one I want you to pay attention to is these two right here in the very bottom, if you can see them right there. One is behind the slide groove, you can see it right here, and then this one is in front of the slide groove, and it's more angled toward this fashion, like this, the way my straw is. It tees with the main one back here. What this one does is this feeds the circuit at idle, so it uses the air mixture screw, which is over here, and then it bleeds gas air mix up through that hole to feed the bike at idle. And then of course the air goes past here. Now once the slide opens a little bit, then this other jet helps with this one to regulate just off idle conditions. So this one is imperative. I see a lot of people miss this one right here in the front. They forget about it. They kind of look down through the bowl like this. They can see light through the two holes. They say, oh, I'm good, and then put it back together, and they can't understand why their bike don't idle. So make sure you clean that out. If you can't clean that out with cleaner, the best thing to do is get a strand out of a cable for a throttle cable or something very tiny, something that'll fit that orifice. Use a pair of needle nose pliers and just slide it in and out. And what you want to do is, while you're sliding it in and out of that hole, you want to look down in the tiny hole down here in the very bottom, this one just behind the slide. You want to look at that one, and you'll actually see the wire going into it as you're pushing it in and out. That way you know you're getting all the way to the bottom. If you shove that thing in there and there's a piece of dirt in there and you didn't check that, it's very easy to miss it, and then next thing you know, you got idle problems. So always check that. And we'll go through and clean this carburetor right quick. If you got an auto port stir handy, grab a can of this. It's Birkenbau's 2+2. This is a carb cleaner, PVC cleaner. This stuff will eat the oil out of like carbon and different things, so you can kind of clean that up. But it's very good for cleaning carburetors. It'll cut like yellowing gum and yellow shellac looking stuff. It'll cut that, like it'll cut a lot of stuff out of there. It's made to eat, so don't spray yourself to death with this thing, because it is a dryer. It will dry your skin out over time, so you don't want to continuously use it all day. But I mean, you can use it in the fashion I'm using it, and it probably won't hurt you. So I think we got all 4 corners of this carburetor covered. There's a couple air bleed holes here. Generally one of them is working, one of them is not. Sometimes both of them are working. You might see a hose connected here. This is just to feed these air holes that are right here in the bottom of the bowl, and they're used for equilibrium in between the bowl pressure and the atmospheric pressure, so that way that the carb doesn't build up any pressure in this portion and force fuel into the engine where it's causing it to run funny. This is used as a vent just to kind of balance that. So we're going to go through and clean this carburetor right quick. I don't know what we'll find with it. This is an older carburetor. It's probably 40 years old, and I've never cleaned this one before. I've got several I've kind of went through over the years, but I've never cleaned this specific one, so it's hard to say what we'll find wrong with it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to check the pilot circuit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the air screw out. We want to take this air screw out right here. Just unscrew that, take it out. Now there is a spring behind there. Make sure you don't lose that spring that comes out with it. Just make sure you keep that all together. And what we want to do is we want to check the air hole all the way to the pilot to make sure that that is open. So what we're going to do is stick a straw in here, like so. If I can get it in that hole there. And then what we want to do is we want to take our finger and put it over the screw hole. Now, because we took the screw out, and what that'll allow to do, that'll allow the full blast from the can to actually go on through the hole without being restricted by that screw that's stuck in there, because the screw blocks some of the opening. So stick your tube in there, put your finger over the hole on this side, this one right here, put your finger over the hole, and what you should see is you should see gas dripping out from this spot right here. This means it's coming out somewhere. See that? And notice that it's coming out on top as well. See that? So we know that's good. Now we can force it to kind of go in various directions because this thing has got like it's like a four-way intersection here. So what I want to do is I want to make sure the top side of the bowl is, top side of the body is clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block this off with my hand. And I can also screw the pilot in there too, but a lot of times I like to make sure that all the jets are out. I'll put my finger over the one hole in the back here, and then I can put my finger over the hole in there just with one hand, kind of like that. And then I can spray in there again. See how it's spraying out from the car body now, so we know that the main orifice is clean. Sometimes when you're spraying it, you might see it come out that little jet in the front if you hit it hard enough. I don't want to hit it too hard. But you can see there, see how it's blowing out the front of the carburetor like that? Well, that means that that little tiny one here in the front is also open. A lot of times what happens is it'll spray up in this area, but won't spray forward. That's telling you that this little one, this little tiny one in the front is clogged, but this main one is allowing the cleaner to go through. So you want to make sure you do that. Another way you can do it is to take the air screw, you can put it back in here, kind of block this off. So what we're going to do is we're going to screw that all the way down so it kind of just blocks off that particular avenue for the cleaner to go in. We'll screw that all the way in, all the way till it's seated. Then we'll grab the carb cleaner. Now we're not going to go back through here because the screw's kind of blocking it off here in the back. What we're going to do is we're going to go up through the pilot, right through here. And you'll feel it, there's a threaded area where the pilot goes in, and then the straw will kind of push up in there just a little bit further and get in the center. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that the carb cleaner is coming straight out that hole right there. See how it's shooting out there? See how it's shooting out? So we know that that's clean. Now the next thing we want to do is put our finger in the hole, and we want to block off the big one that's in there, like this. Stick your thumb all the way down the orifice, block that big pilot off, but you want to leave this little small one in the front exposed. So when you spray this up in there, what you should see is carb cleaner shooting out the front now. See how it's coming out the front? Now it's not going to be a whole lot, but it's going to be enough to know that that thing's open. Okay, see how it's coming out? See? So we know that that's clean. Alright, the next one to go through is you can remove this, but a lot of times, you know, they're all, you know, over the years they've kind of seized up in there and they make it kind of difficult. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll take a punch like the size of this, put it in here, knock this thing out all the way through the bowl, you know, through the carb body and clean off all the carbon. A lot of times it gets a little carbon wrapped around it in here. There's no air jets to bleed in here other than the one at the very top. And so, you know, you don't have to take this out, but you just want to make sure that, you know, the hole is cleaned out in there and make sure it's good to go. Now, we're going to test the air bleed hole for that thing. So we want to make sure that this hole is clean. This will affect all off idle settings, you know, anywhere up to 3/8 of a throttle. If this is plugged up, it'll cause the bike to go rich. If this is missing the little orifice in there, it'll cause the bike to go lean. It's in there, we can see that because the straw is pushing on it, and I think I've already checked this one. It's actually, the little relief is actually down in there. So what we want to do is we want to put the straw in this hole, and what we want to watch for is gas blowing out of that needle jet fluid. See, now see how it's just starting to leak in there now? See that? So this one must still be just a little bit dirty. Now, if you need to really clean it out good, you can knock this out and then blow in here, and then there won't be any restriction. This thing actually has a little relief on the back of it to kind of allow the air to go up and circulate in that little donut down there in the bottom, circulate around the tube, so it gets better, you know, gas dispersion at that particular point. But you want to make sure that this is clean. This should be clean. You should see something coming out there at the tube. You know, I think you can kind of see it there. You know, it's just starting to leak, but it must have just a little bit of dirt. These holes are very tiny, so don't be shoving drill bits and things of that in there. Find something the right size if you're going to run something down in there. Use a strand off a throttle cable or something like that. I've seen guys push drill bits down in there and they wind up screwing them up, and then they can't understand why the carburetor runs like crap at mid-throttle. It's because you screwed it up cleaning it. So don't do that. I think we're pretty much done with this section of the carburetor. You might want to check you'll want to check the choke to make sure that's good. There's a little hole down here in the very bottom where the plunger goes down in. This one actually comes out this brass tube right here, so you can actually get the straw on this little hole right here. And if you spray it, it should be coming out that hole. It should be coming out this brass tube here. You can see I just sprayed it, it didn't come out. So what I can do is I can actually turn it around and then put the straw on this end and then fire back the other way. Now see, you can see it coming out now. See, there must have been something in there, so I knocked it out. A lot of dirt likes to collect in that little tiny pinhole, and then it plugs up the choke, and then it causes problems with trying to start the bike and all that crazy nonsense. So after you get done with all that, you can put all that back together again, and then you'll move on to this bowl. There's one orifice in the bowl. It's right down here in the very bottom. Generally this will fit a straw, so you want to put the straw in the hole there, and what you want to do is you want to shoot up through the bowl and make sure that that is clean. If this is not clean, this will give you all kinds of starting trouble. It won't want to start on choke. So what you want to do is get in there. I don't think I got it perfectly lined up, but what you want to do is you want to ooh, there you go. See, whatever was in there finally popped out. So whatever's in there, you know, make sure that when you blow in this hole, the fluid is coming out this hole. You can also go this way. You can also stick it in, you know, from this end and go the other way like that. So you can kind of see it bubbling up down there in the very bottom. See, it must have knocked out whatever was in there earlier. But make sure that's fully clean. And then you can also take and pour gas in this section of the bowl. You should see the gas rise up in here within about a half a second to a second. Actually come up and meet the level. So depending on how fast you pour the gas in here, it might rise with the gas. But if you pour it real fast, the bowl may fill up first, and this may take a second to actually get to the top. But the gas level in here should be level with the gas level in this spot. Okay, when it settles out. If it don't, then this one don't have any gas in it, it means that's still plugged up. What happens is a lot of dirt collects in this little spot down here in the very bottom where the main jet is, and some of the, you know, during rocking around, shaking and stuff, it'll break loose and fly around in the gas, and then if you choke it, it'll actually suck it into that hole and then plug it up, and then you'll have problems with the choke. So other than that, I think that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot to it. You can see this is probably very similar to yours, clamp style carburetor. This carburetor may even fit the clamp that you got, the clamp style you got. Some of the earlier ones all came with the same size clamp, but I think around VM24 or 22, I think this clamp changes sizes. So, you can stick bigger carbs on their same body style. You would have to go for an SC and find something that actually had one with a bigger carburetor if you wanted to go to a bigger carburetor. But just be warned, if you put a bigger carburetor on there, this brass component here is not available. You can't buy this. So if this midsection requires some tuning that the needle can't compensate for, you can try different needles. Different needles are available, but this particular brass tube right here is no longer available. So you do not want to damage it. Don't damage the flute. Don't mess that up, because anything wrong with that thing will affect the midsection tremendously. I think that's about it. Always check your float. Always shake your float. Make sure it's not full gas before you put it back in. When you reassemble the thing and put the float back in here with the float pin and put the bowl on top of it, and bolt that all back down. Take this thing inverted like this and kind of just shake it real lightly like that, and you'll be able to tell whether that float is loose in there or not, because you'll hear it kind of like banging around in there like that, where it's actually shaking. If you put the bowl on and you don't hear no noise, 9 times out of 10 this thing is stuck on the wall here somewhere inside this bowl, and it won't release it, or it's pushing up on it. And that usually comes from these things getting spread out. You can see this is kind of a tapered one, and it kind of matches this bowl here with its taper, so it has to fit in there perfectly as it goes down. If the thing, it should fit in all the way to the bottom without any interference from the slide, just like that, from the bowl, just like that. If this thing is too wide, it will actually scrape the sides, and then it'll kind of hang up in operation. Also check this thing. This is the slide that goes in the top. Make sure that this thing kind of slides. You want a tight fit on it. Make sure it's kind of, it fits kind of snug in the bore. You want to be able to slide it up and down like that, but you don't want too much slack in here where this thing's like banging around, or to give it like an air leak. So make sure that's good. Make sure the travel's good. All that's good. This thing slides up and down. There's no hang-ups. It's not rough or anything like that. If it is, take and coat your inside here with this stuff, and then take your slide and run it down in there a few times, and usually that'll break up any of the nonsense that's going on down in the bottom of the carburetor. Other than that, you want to check this jet. This pilot jet, I think yours had a 17.5 in it. Typically what I do is I'll put the straw on the back end like this, and I'll put my hands around the little holes in here. There's little bleed holes in here. You kind of see them right here. That's where the air jet in the back of the carburetor actually feeds the air to this circuit. You want to make sure that's plugged off with your fingers. Take the tube, put it on the back end, and then if you spray it, it should come out the front of the nozzle, kind of like that. See how it's coming out the front? See? Just like that. Make sure that's good. And then of course the main, make sure that's good. You can stick it in this end, blow backwards, and make sure that's cleaned out and that's ready to go. And then once you do all that, then you just put the carburetor back together. And once you get it back together, then you want to set the air screw. Typically these are set in between 1 and 2 turns, somewhere in that neighborhood. If you're too small, say you're at half a turn, then the pilot jet's too small. If you're over 2 turns, then the pilot jet is too big. What you want is the jet that actually keeps the screw about in between 1 and 2 turns usually. The stock one's usually fine, so I probably wouldn't change from that unless there was some kind of drastic idle problem or mixture problem, or maybe I put a uni on the back of this thing and it's breathing more air now, and the pilot circuit's running a little lean. At idle, I can turn this in just a little bit, and it'll kind of richen that circuit up for me. So it makes, without having to change the pilot jet itself, I can just turn this in, a quarter turn, and that'll probably solve the problem. Always check behind here. What happens is trash or gum or mud daubers or whatever you got, they'll actually get in there and plug all that crap up. Make sure that's good both ways. So stick the straw in here and spray down in there, and you should see it come out where the gas goes in. Spray it back this way, Make sure you got all the trash knocked out of there. It does kind of run like this. It runs down and then cuts over one side and then goes up. So where it's cutting down through the carburetor is usually where the trash develops. So